They sold lake access they never owned. The morning started with an HOA president screaming into a phone and demanding deputies force open my private lake road. Behind her stood dozens of homeowners carrying fishing poles, kayaks, and coolers, all convinced I was the problem. What they didn't know was that I had 40 years of records sitting in my truck, and the officers arriving weren't the ones Vanessa Crowe expected. Before the day was over, a simple argument over a locked gate would expose missing easements, broken promises, and documents nobody thought would ever be questioned. And the deeper the county dug, the worse it got. If you enjoy stories about land rights, HOA overreach, and ordinary folks standing their ground with facts instead of noise, take a second to subscribe. We've got plenty more stories where patience, paperwork, and common sense end up telling the real story. Now let me show you how one phone call changed everything. The first thing I heard that morning wasn't a bird or a boat engine. It was a woman yelling into a phone. I was standing beside a locked steel gate at the entrance to Eagle Rock Lake, holding a travel mug of coffee in one hand and watching fog drift across the water beyond the pines. The road behind the gate stretched almost a mile down to the shoreline. My shoreline. Then Vanessa Crowe pointed at me like she'd caught a criminal. "Tell them he's blocking access right now," she shouted into her phone. "Tell them people could get hurt." A few homeowners behind her nodded immediately. Others pulled out their phones and started recording. I took another sip of coffee. That seemed to irritate her even more. It was Memorial Day weekend, and Vanessa had promised the residents of Silver Ridge Estates a community lake celebration. Fishing tournaments, kayak races, family picnics. There was only one problem. She'd planned the entire event on property she didn't own. Nearly 40 people stood behind her now. Pickup trucks lined the gravel shoulder. Kayaks sat strapped to roof racks. Coolers filled the backs of SUVs. Folding chairs leaned against bumpers. Most of those people weren't bad people. Most of them had simply believed what they'd been told. Vanessa ended the call and lowered her phone dramatically. "I've contacted the sheriff's office." Nobody said anything. She smiled, the kind of smile people wear when they're already imagining their victory. "Good," I said. That caught her off guard. For half a second, she looked confused. Then she recovered. "You think this is funny?" "No." "You're interfering with community access." "No, I'm protecting private property." A murmur moved through the crowd. Vanessa immediately turned toward them. "See?" she said. "He's admitting it." I almost laughed. People like Vanessa always thought volume could replace facts. Unfortunately for her, property law doesn't work that way. The steel chain across the gate rattled softly in the breeze. The sound pulled my attention for a moment. 3 years ago, my wife Ellen had stood right beside that chain. Cancer had already taken most of her strength by then. But every morning she insisted on riding down to the lake with me anyway. She used to say the water made everything quiet. I pushed the memory aside. This wasn't the morning for it. Vanessa was still talking. "He thinks because he's lived here forever he can control everyone." A man holding a fishing rod stepped forward. "Ma'am told us this was HOA access." I looked at him. "Did she show you paperwork?" The man hesitated. Vanessa answered before he could. "The HOA has legal rights." "Which rights?" She folded her arms. "The community has used this road for months." That's not what I asked. The crowd grew quieter. I noticed several people exchange glances. Vanessa hated questions she couldn't answer. That was becoming obvious. A white SUV rolled into the ditch line. Another homeowner climbed out carrying a stack of printed event flyers. I recognized the flyer immediately. A picture of Eagle Rock Lake filled the front page. My dock was visible in the background. So were the flower boxes Ellen built herself. Vanessa had used photographs of my property to advertise her event. Again. The anger hit me harder than I expected. Not because of the dock, not because of the road, because Ellen's flowers were still hanging there, and strangers had turned them into marketing material. Mr. Holloway. I looked up. An older woman stood near the front of the crowd, nervous, uncomfortable. Is this really your road? Yes. All of it. Every foot. Vanessa immediately stepped between us. Don't listen to him. I raised an eyebrow. The woman frowned. For the first time, doubt appeared in several faces. Vanessa saw it too. That made her louder. Everybody stay calm. The deputies are on the way. She pointed toward the chain. They'll have this opened in 20 minutes. The crowd seemed relieved. That was the story they'd been expecting. The stubborn rancher loses. Authority arrives. Problem solved. Simple. Except nothing about this situation was simple. Because while Vanessa was busy organizing lake parties and selling access rights, I'd spent the last year collecting every document connected to this road. Every survey, every permit, every maintenance record, every filing. Everything sat inside a weathered binder locked in the cab of my truck. And Vanessa had never bothered to look at any of it. A distant siren echoed through the trees. Heads turned immediately. The homeowners straightened. Vanessa smiled again. There they are. Dust rose above the road beyond the hill. 2 sheriff vehicles appeared. The crowd visibly relaxed. Several people started recording again. One teenager climbed onto the tailgate of a truck to get a better angle. Vanessa adjusted her sunglasses, victory already written across her face. The vehicles rolled closer, slower than I expected. Neither deputy looked rushed, neither looked concerned. That was the first sign. The second came when the lead SUV stopped. The driver's door opened, and the deputy who stepped out immediately looked past Vanessa. Straight at me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then a grin spread across his face. Morning, Jack. The crowd went silent. Vanessa blinked. I nodded once. Morning, Ethan. Deputy Ethan Brooks closed the door and walked toward the gate. Not toward Vanessa, toward me. The confidence drained from her face so fast it was almost impressive. What is this? She demanded. Ethan ignored the question. Instead, he stopped beside the gate and glanced at the chain. Then he looked at me. You got your paperwork with you? I took another sip of coffee. Sure do. And for the first time all morning, Vanessa Crowe looked worried. Because the deputies who had just arrived weren't the officers she expected, and whatever happened next wasn't going to follow her script. Vanessa recovered quickly. People like her always did. She stepped forward before Deputy Ethan Brooks could say another word. Deputy, this man is blocking access to community property. Ethan didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed on me. You got the binder? I nodded. In the truck. That exchange alone changed the mood. The crowd noticed it immediately. Vanessa noticed it too. What binder? She demanded. Neither of us answered. Ethan turned toward the second sheriff vehicle. A woman climbed out carrying a hard-sided county records case. The moment I saw her, I knew this morning had just become a lot more interesting. Martha Gaines, county records supervisor, 30 years in the clerk's office. The woman probably knew more about Bell County property lines than the surveyors who drew them. Vanessa frowned. Why is she here? Martha walked straight past her. Morning, Jack. Morning, Martha. Then she looked at the gate, the chain, the road, the crowd. I had a feeling this was about Eagle Rock. That was the second time Vanessa got ignored. She didn't like it. Not one bit. Excuse me, she snapped. I'm the HOA president. Martha finally turned toward her. Good for you. A few homeowners tried not to laugh. Vanessa's face tightened. I opened the driver's door of my truck and pulled out the binder. The thing was thick enough to stop a door. Brown leather, worn edges, 40 years of paperwork. My father used to call it the most expensive object on the ranch. Not because of what it cost, because of what it protected. I laid it on the hood. The crowd leaned closer. Vanessa crossed her arms. This is ridiculous. Maybe. But paperwork has a funny way of becoming important when lawyers get involved. Martha opened the binder. The first page wasn't dramatic. No secret map, no hidden deed, just maintenance records, year after year. Gravel purchases, culvert replacements, drainage repairs. Every receipt carefully dated, every expense tied to the same road. Eagle Rock Private Access Road. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Maintenance records don't prove ownership. Correct, Martha said. Then she flipped another page, and another, and another. Property tax filings, road improvement permits, survey references, county inspection approvals. The crowd grew quieter. One homeowner lowered his phone. Another stepped closer. I recognized Ryan Porter near the front. Retired Air Force. Good guy. Moved into Silver Ridge 6 months ago. His wife Lisa stood beside him. They looked confused. The way people look when the story they've been told starts changing shape. Martha reached a tab marked 1984. She stopped there. My chest tightened slightly. Not because I was worried, because I knew exactly what was behind it. The original registration documents. My father's documents. The ones he spent weeks putting together after finishing the road. Back then, Eagle Rock was mostly ranch land. No subdivision. No HOA. Just families and cattle. My father believed one thing. If you build something important, document it. Because eventually, somebody will claim they own it. Turns out he was right. Martha carefully pulled out the first filing. A yellowed county record. Stamped. Recorded. Official. She held it up. This road was registered as private maintenance access in 1984. Silence. Not complete silence, but close. Vanessa immediately stepped forward. That doesn't matter. Martha looked at her. Why wouldn't it matter? Because the community uses the road now. A few homeowners nodded. Martha didn't. That's not how ownership works. That landed harder than Vanessa expected. The crowd felt it. Ryan Porter frowned. Wait. He looked at Vanessa. You told us the HOA controlled lake access. Vanessa answered immediately. We do. Martha calmly held up another document. Can you show me where? No answer. For the first time all morning, Vanessa didn't have one. The silence stretched. I could almost hear the gears turning inside the crowd's heads. Questions, doubts, concerns, the things HOA boards hate most. Then Ethan spoke. Jack. I looked at him. When was the last time anyone from the HOA asked to see these records? I almost smiled. Never. Several people exchanged surprised looks. Never. Not once. Vanessa had spent an entire year telling people this road belonged to the community, and she had never bothered checking the county records. That realization hit the crowd harder than anything else so far. Martha closed the binder. Not because she was finished, because she wasn't. Not even close. She rested one hand on the cover. Then she looked directly at Vanessa. Out of curiosity, where exactly is the HOA's easement paperwork? Vanessa's confidence returned immediately. There is an easement. Great, Martha said. Recorded when? Vanessa hesitated. Only for a second. But everyone saw it. And once people notice hesitation, they start paying attention. Well, our attorney handled that. Martha nodded slowly. I see. Then she opened her records case. Inside were copies of county filings, search results, property maps, official records, the kind of documents that don't care about opinions, or promises, or HOA meetings. And as she started sorting through them, I saw something I hadn't expected. A brief flicker of concern crossed her face. Very brief. Gone almost immediately. But it was there. That caught my attention. Because Martha Gaines wasn't the type to get rattled easily. She pulled out a file, looked at it, then looked at another. Finally, she frowned. That's strange. Ethan noticed too. What is? Martha didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared down at the documents in her hands. Then she slowly looked up, and the expression on her face told me this fight was about to become much bigger than a disagreement over a locked gate. What is it? Ethan asked. Martha glanced at Vanessa before answering. I want to verify something before I say it out loud. Vanessa immediately jumped in. Verify what? Martha ignored her and closed the records case. I'll need access to the development filings. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Why? Because some of these references don't match. That was enough to change the mood completely. 5 minutes earlier, this had been a crowd waiting to watch a rancher lose an argument. Now people were looking at the HOA president instead. Questions had started. And once questions start, they rarely stop. Ryan Porter stepped forward. What references? Martha answered carefully. The subdivision marketing materials reference community lake access. Ryan nodded. That's why we bought. His wife Lisa held up a folded brochure. So did we. Several homeowners suddenly started talking at once. We got one too. Ours said lake privileges. Our realtor mentioned private access. Vanessa raised both hands. Everybody calm down. Nobody listened. Because for the first time, the homeowners weren't looking at me. They were looking at her. And that took me back almost a year. Back before the gate. Before the deputies. Before anyone cared about property records. The first sign appeared in April. I found it planted beside my fence near the entrance road. Silver Ridge Estates, private lake access. Blue lettering. HOA logo. Arrow pointing directly toward my land. I pulled it out of the ground and tossed it into the bed of my truck. The second sign appeared 3 days later. Then a third. Then a fourth. Every one of them pointed toward Eagle Rock Lake. Every one of them sat on property Vanessa didn't own. I drove to the HOA office with all 4 signs stacked in my truck bed. Vanessa greeted me with a smile. The same smile she wore now. Confident, certain, dangerous. You can't put these on my property. She glanced at the signs. They're informational. They're trespassing. She laughed. Actually laughed. It's just a road, Jack. No. I pointed toward the lake. It's ownership. Her smile faded slightly. Only slightly. Then she leaned back in her chair. The community needs access. The community isn't entitled to access, she waved dismissively. That attitude isn't going to age well. That was Vanessa's favorite tactic. She never argued facts. She argued inevitability, growth, progress, development, as if repeating those words could somehow transfer ownership. A month later, strangers started appearing at my dock. Families carrying coolers, teenagers carrying fishing rods, couples unloading kayaks. Most were polite. Most honestly believed they belonged there. One man even thanked me for maintaining the HOA waterfront. I remember staring at him for several seconds, then asking who told him that. He pulled out a brochure. Silver Ridge Estates Luxury Lake Living. The cover showed Eagle Rock Lake, my shoreline, my dock, my property. I still have that brochure. The homeowners standing around the gate didn't know it yet, but many of them had seen the same one. The same photographs, the same promises, the same sales pitch. Back in the present, Lisa Porter slowly unfolded her copy. The paper shook slightly in her hands. She pointed toward a photograph. "That's your dock?" I nodded. Ryan looked at Vanessa. "You used his property in the advertising?" "It represents the lake experience." That answer made things worse. Several people immediately started talking again. One homeowner pulled out his phone. Another started searching through emails. A woman near the back held up a flyer from a neighborhood open house. The momentum had shifted. Not completely, but enough. Then Ethan noticed something. What exactly were residents paying recreation fees for? Dead silence. Nobody answered immediately, because everybody suddenly wanted the same answer, including me. Vanessa folded her arms. "The HOA maintains recreational amenities." "Which ones?" Ethan asked. "The future facilities." That answer landed like a rock. Even she seemed to realize it. Ryan Porter stared at her. "Future facilities?" Lisa looked down at the brochure again, then back at Vanessa. And for the first time all morning, she looked angry. Not confused, not concerned. Angry, because people can tolerate mistakes. What they hate is feeling deceived. Martha closed the records case. "I think we need to look at every filing connected to Silver Ridge." Vanessa immediately objected. "That's unnecessary." Martha locked eyes with her. "No." She nodded toward the brochures in everyone's hands. "I think it's becoming very necessary." And standing there beside the gate, watching homeowners compare promises to reality, I realized something important. This wasn't about me anymore. This wasn't even about the road. The moment those residents started reading their own paperwork, the real fight had finally begun, and nobody knew how far it was about to go. Vanessa knew she was losing control. You could see it in the way she kept trying to interrupt people. Every time a homeowner asked a question, she answered with another sales pitch. Every time someone mentioned documents, she started talking about community vision. The problem was that vision doesn't hold up very well against county records. Martha opened her case again. This time she pulled out a large folded property map. She spread it across the hood of my truck. Immediately, a crowd gathered around it. Colored parcel lines covered the page. Ownership boundaries, road easements, utility corridors. The kind of information people usually ignore until a lawsuit shows up. Martha pointed at the gravel road behind the gate. "This parcel is registered to Holloway Ranch Holdings." She traced the line with her finger. "Road included." Then she pointed toward Silver Ridge Estates. "Subdivision starts here." A homeowner near the back frowned. "Where's the HOA easement?" Martha looked at him. "That's exactly the issue." Vanessa stepped forward. "We have access rights." "Show them." The voice came from Deputy Ethan Brooks. Not loud, not aggressive, just direct. Vanessa turned toward him. "Our attorney has the documentation." "Where is it?" "He isn't here." Ethan nodded. "Then let's work with what we have." That answer hit harder than a confrontation would have, because now everyone understood something important. The HOA president was claiming rights she couldn't actually produce. Ryan Porter folded his brochure and tucked it under his arm. "Vanessa, when we bought our house, we were told this lake access was permanent." "It is. Based on what?" No answer. The silence stretched. Lisa Porter looked down at the map, then back at Vanessa. "You never checked ownership?" Vanessa's expression hardened. "This isn't helping." "No," Lisa replied. "I think it is." Several homeowners nodded. The balance of power had shifted. Not completely, but enough. Then Martha pulled another document from her case. A county filing search report. Several pages stapled together. She scanned it one more time. The same concern appeared on her face. The one I'd noticed earlier. Ethan saw it too. "Martha." She looked up. "There's no recorded easement." Vanessa immediately objected. "That's impossible." Martha calmly handed the report to Ethan. "I checked twice before I drove out here." Ethan skimmed the pages, then frowned. "Nothing?" "Nothing." A ripple moved through the crowd. People started talking again. Faster now, more urgently, because this wasn't a technical disagreement anymore. Either the HOA had legal access, or it didn't. And according to county records, it didn't. Vanessa crossed her arms. "There must be a mistake." Martha shook her head. "County records don't accidentally lose easements." That line landed like a hammer. A homeowner holding a kayak paddle lowered it slowly. Another woman started flipping through digital documents on her tablet. Someone else asked for copies of the filing report. Questions were multiplying. Vanessa was running out of answers. Then a black SUV appeared at the end of the road. Everyone turned. The vehicle rolled slowly toward the gate. County seal on the door. Official plates. Martha's eyes narrowed immediately. "I didn't ask for him." The SUV stopped. A tall man stepped out carrying a leather document tube. I recognized him instantly. So did Martha. "Tom Weaver," she said quietly. Regional Records Auditor. The kind of person who only shows up when paperwork starts causing problems. Real problems. Tom walked toward the crowd, looked at the map, looked at Martha, then looked at Vanessa. "Interesting morning." Nobody laughed. Tom pulled several documents from the tube. "County administrator asked me to verify something." Vanessa looked hopeful for the first time in an hour. That hope lasted about 5 seconds. Tom handed the papers to Martha. She read the first page, then the second, then slowly looked up. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Tom answered before she could. "We searched every recorded filing connected to Silver Ridge Estates." The crowd went silent. "There has never been an approved easement granting HOA access to Eagle Rock Road." This time nobody argued, not even Vanessa, because the statement hadn't come from me, or Ethan, or Martha. It came from a county auditor, officially, publicly, on the record. Ryan Porter stared at Vanessa. "So, what exactly were we paying for?" Nobody had an answer. Not yet. But standing beside that locked gate, I realized the fight had crossed a line. The question was no longer whether the HOA owned the road. That question had just been answered. The new question was much worse. If the HOA never had legal access rights, what exactly had they been selling to all those homeowners? That question sat in the air heavier than the locked gate. Nobody moved for a few seconds. Then Ryan Porter stepped toward Vanessa with his brochure in one hand and his phone in the other. "Our appraisal lists lake access as a neighborhood amenity." Vanessa's face tightened. "Ryan, this is not the time." It was the time when we signed the mortgage. A few people murmured agreement. Lisa Porter opened a folder she had pulled from the passenger seat of their SUV. She wasn't yelling. That made it worse. Calm people with paperwork are harder to dismiss. "This is our closing packet," she said. "Page 7. It says private recreational corridor." She looked at Martha. "Does that mean the road?" Martha didn't answer quickly. She took the packet, read the line, then glanced toward Tom Weaver. Tom's expression darkened. "It suggests access," he said, "but it doesn't identify a recorded easement." Ryan turned back toward Vanessa. You told us this was settled. Vanessa forced a laugh. No, I said access was part of the development plan. Lisa held up the brochure. This says guaranteed resident lake privileges. That word changed the crowd. Guaranteed. People know what that means. One man pulled a crumpled flyer from his glove box. Another woman opened an email from the HOA Welcome Committee. Within minutes, the hood of my truck became a table full of promises. Flyers, sales packets, HOA newsletters, screenshots. Every page had the same flavor: lake lifestyle, private water access, community shoreline, resident launch point, my road, my lake, my dock, used again and again like decoration in someone else's business plan. Ethan looked at the growing stack, then at Vanessa. Did the HOA collect recreation fees tied to these amenities? Vanessa's mouth opened, closed. Then she said, "The fees support future improvements." A homeowner near the back snapped. "We paid for a dock we can't legally reach?" "No one said that," Vanessa replied. "You did," Lisa said, tapping the brochure. "Right here." The crowd turned sharper now, not violent, not wild, just awake. That was worse for Vanessa than anger. Awake people remember details. Ryan scrolled through his phone and held it out. "Here, email from the HOA office. It says Memorial Day lake access is included with annual dues." Martha took a photo of the screen. Vanessa lunged forward. "You can't just copy private HOA communications." Martha didn't flinch. "If residents voluntarily provide them to county officials, yes, I can document them." That shut her down. For the first time that morning, Vanessa looked past the crowd toward the subdivision road like she wanted an exit. But the homeowners had surrounded the truth now, and truth doesn't leave room for easy escape. A younger man in a ball cap spoke up. "My realtor said Silver Ridge had water rights." Tom Weaver looked at him. "Who provided that statement?" "The HOA packet." Tom wrote that down. Another woman said her mortgage valuation was higher because of lake access. Another said her insurance documents listed recreational shoreline facilities. Every answer opened another door. Every door led back to Vanessa. I stayed quiet. That was hard. Hearing strangers talk about my dock, my wife's flower boxes, my road, as if they were line items in some sales package, made something cold settle in my chest. But my father had taught me never to interrupt your opponent while she's building your case for you. Vanessa finally raised her voice. "This is being blown out of proportion. Jack has always been difficult. He refuses to cooperate with community growth." That old line again. Growth. Like the word could forgive anything. I looked at her. "No, Vanessa. I refuse to let you sell what wasn't yours." The crowd went silent. She pointed at me. "You are destroying property values." "No," I said. "The truth is..." That one landed. Even Ethan looked away for a second. Then Lisa Porter said something quietly that changed the morning. "We put our retirement into that house." Ryan lowered his head. Several others went still. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. This was money. Homes, retirement, trust. Vanessa had not just picked a fight with a rancher. She may have exposed every homeowner in Silver Ridge to a financial disaster. Tom closed his notebook. "Martha, we need to pull the full development file." Martha nodded. "I agree." Vanessa stepped forward quickly. "There's no reason for that." Tom looked at her. "There is now." Ethan turned to the crowd. "Nobody is opening this gate today." A wave of frustration moved through the homeowners, but it wasn't aimed at me anymore. The lake event was over before it started. Kayaks stayed strapped to roof racks. Coolers stayed closed. Fishing rods went back into trucks. And Vanessa Crowe stood in front of all of them with no gate open, no easement, and no answer. As people began returning to their vehicles, Ryan Porter stopped beside me. His voice was low. "Mr. Holloway, did you know this could happen?" I looked at the road behind the gate, then at the binder on my truck. I knew she was lying about the road. He swallowed. But not the rest? I didn't answer right away, because the truth was worse. I suspected. Ryan looked toward Vanessa. "What happens now?" Martha answered from behind us. "Now we find out who else knew." And the way Vanessa's head snapped toward her told me we had just asked the one question she feared most. The crowd dispersed slowly after that. Nobody was celebrating. Nobody was smiling. People left carrying brochures, closing packets, and a growing sense that something was wrong. Very wrong. Vanessa stayed near the gate for another 10 minutes, arguing with Tom Weaver and Martha Gaines. It didn't help. Every answer she gave created 2 more questions. Eventually, she climbed into her SUV and drove away without another word. That was the first time I'd ever seen her retreat. It wouldn't be the last. 3 days later, I found myself in the basement archives of the county courthouse. Martha had called me early that morning. "Bring the binder." That was all she said. When a county records supervisor asks for 40 years of documentation, you don't ask questions. You show up. The archive room sat beneath the courthouse behind a steel security door. Rows of filing cabinets stretched across the room. Old maps, survey records, development applications, decades of county history. Tom Weaver was already there when I arrived. So was another surprise. Daniel Price, the HOA attorney. He stood beside a table stacked with development files. His expensive suit looked completely out of place underground. He didn't look happy. "Jack." "Daniel?" Martha noticed the exchange. "You two know each other?" Daniel gave a tired smile. "Unfortunately." That answer earned the first laugh I'd heard all week. Not from me, from Tom. And that told me something. Daniel Price wasn't here to defend Vanessa. He was here because he was worried. Martha opened a thick file labeled Silver Ridge Estates Development Approvals. Then she started laying documents across the table. Subdivision maps, environmental reviews, infrastructure requests, road applications, easement proposals. The deeper she dug, the quieter the room became, because none of it matched the story homeowners had been told. By noon, we had established 3 facts. First, no easement had ever been approved. Second, the county had rejected the HOA's lake access proposal more than a year earlier. Third, the rejection had been formally acknowledged by the development company. That last one mattered. A lot. Because it meant somebody knew. Someone had received official notice. Daniel rubbed a hand across his forehead. "When was this acknowledgement signed?" Martha slid the page across the table. 14 months ago. Daniel read it twice, then a third time. His expression changed. "You've got to be kidding me." Tom looked over. "What?" Daniel tapped the signature block. "The development company signed for receipt." Nobody spoke. The implication hung there, heavy, because Silver Ridge had continued advertising lake access long after the rejection. Tom broke the silence. "Could the HOA have been unaware?" Daniel looked at him. "No." The answer came too quickly, too confidently. Martha noticed. "So somebody knew." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." The room went quiet again. An hour later, things got worse. Martha pulled another folder from storage. This one wasn't labeled under the HOA. It was labeled Marketing Materials. Inside were archived submissions attached to development approvals, advertisements, promotional maps, sales graphics. Then Martha froze. She stared at one page, then another, then a third. Tom noticed immediately. "What is it?" Martha didn't answer. She spread 3 documents side by side. The first was the original county application. The second was a revised filing. The third was a marketing map used by Silver Ridge. At first glance, they looked identical. Then I noticed a sentence. One sentence. Just 11 words, but it didn't belong. Martha pointed directly at it. "That's strange." Tom leaned forward. Daniel did too. The room became very quiet, because the wording on one version didn't match the wording on the others. Not even close. Tom narrowed his eyes. "When was that added?" Martha looked at the filing date, then at the approval history, then back at the document. Slowly, carefully, like she already knew the answer but didn't want to say it. It shouldn't be there. Daniel stared at the page. The color drained from his face. And for the first time since this started, I stopped thinking about a road. Stopped thinking about brochures. Stopped thinking about HOA fees. Because something else had just entered the picture. Not a mistake. Not a misunderstanding. A document problem. The kind that county investigators take very seriously. Tom picked up the file. "Martha," she nodded. "I know." Then she looked at me. "Jack, I think we just found the reason everyone kept acting like the easement existed." Nobody said another word, because deep down all of us had arrived at the same possibility. And if that possibility turned out to be true, Silver Ridge's problems were about to become much bigger than a private lake road. Martha didn't sleep on it. Neither did Tom Weaver. The next morning, county investigators pulled every version of the Silver Ridge easement application from the archive system. Paper copies, digital records, submission logs, revision histories, anything connected to the lake access proposal. By noon, I was back in the courthouse. This time, the room felt different. Nobody was guessing anymore. We were looking for proof. Martha had 3 folders spread across the table. Each contained a different version of the same filing. At first glance, they looked identical. Same parcel number, same applicant, same project description, same signatures. Then she pointed to a paragraph near the bottom. "This is the original." I leaned forward. The language was simple. Access request denied pending ownership conflict. Clear, direct, final. Then she slid the second copy beside it. My eyes narrowed immediately. The paragraph was different. Not completely, just enough. The denial language had been replaced with wording that suggested continued review and possible future approval. Tom tapped the page. "That's the version used in the marketing package." Daniel Price looked like he'd swallowed a nail. "You're sure?" Martha handed him both copies. "Read them." He did, twice. Then he slowly lowered the papers. "Those aren't the same document." "No," Martha said. "They're not." The room went silent, because everybody understood what that meant. A typo doesn't change legal meaning. A formatting issue doesn't rewrite a denial. Someone had altered language connected to an official filing. Tom immediately called the county administrator. 20 minutes later, investigators arrived. Not deputies, not code enforcement. Investigators. The kind that show up when paperwork starts creating liability. One of them introduced herself, reviewed the documents, and asked a question nobody had asked yet. Who had access to these records after the rejection? Martha pulled up the archive log. Names appeared on the screen. County staff, development representatives, legal reviewers, outside consultants. Most were routine. One wasn't. Tom noticed it first. That's odd. The login belonged to a development coordinator employed by the Silver Ridge project. The access date occurred 3 days after the rejection notice. The same week, marketing materials were updated. Nobody said anything for several seconds. Then Daniel Price leaned back in his chair. "Oh, this is bad." I looked at him. "How bad?" He rubbed his forehead. "If homeowners bought property based on representations tied to altered filing language, every disclosure package becomes a problem." The investigator nodded. "Potentially a very expensive problem." Daniel stared at the table. For the first time since meeting him, he wasn't acting like an attorney. He was acting like a man watching a train coming down the tracks, fast, and directly toward his client. That afternoon, homeowners started calling the county. Then more homeowners called. Then dozens. Word spreads quickly when people think they were sold something they never actually received. Ryan Porter called me around sunset. "Jack, you okay?" "No." His honesty caught me off guard. "My lender wants copies of everything." I understood immediately. The issue wasn't access anymore. It was value. People had paid premium prices for homes advertised with lake privileges. If those privileges never existed, what happened to the price? What happened to appraisals? What happened to loans? Ryan let out a long breath. "My wife is scared." I looked toward Eagle Rock Lake. "So am I." Because most of those homeowners weren't villains. They weren't the ones planting signs. They weren't the ones making promises. They were people who trusted the wrong person. The next morning, things got worse for Vanessa. Someone leaked portions of the county review online. Side-by-side screenshots appeared in community groups. Original filing, modified filing, highlighted differences. Hundreds of comments followed. Questions turned into accusations. Accusations turned into demands. By lunchtime, Silver Ridge residents were requesting emergency HOA meetings. By evening, several homeowners were organizing together. And by the end of the week, Vanessa Crowe finally made her first real mistake. She called me. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "Jack." Her voice sounded different. Not confident. Not polished. Tired. "What do you want?" "This has gone too far." I laughed once. That seemed to irritate her. "You think this is funny?" "No, I think it's predictable." Silence. Then she lowered her voice. "You could help stop this." There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. A request. Because for the first time since this started, she understood something important. She wasn't fighting a stubborn ranch owner anymore. She was fighting documents. And documents don't negotiate. You sold access you didn't own. I didn't sell anything. The brochures say otherwise. Silence again. Longer this time. Then she said something she clearly didn't intend to say. "The developers assured us the paperwork would be fixed later." I sat up straighter. The line went quiet. Vanessa realized her mistake immediately. But it was too late. Because in one sentence she had confirmed the exact thing investigators were trying to determine. Someone knew there was a problem, and they moved forward anyway. When the call ended, I wrote down everything I remembered. Every word. Every pause. Then I looked at the lake through my kitchen window. The road, the gate, the shoreline. For months, I thought this fight was about protecting my property. Now it was becoming something else. A record of who knew what, and when they knew it. Because the altered filing had finally exposed the truth. The road dispute was only the first crack. The real collapse was just beginning. 3 days after Vanessa's phone call, every homeowner in Silver Ridge received an emergency meeting notice. Mandatory attendance. Community stabilization session. Even the title sounded nervous. Ryan Porter called me that afternoon. You should come. I doubt Vanessa wants that. This meeting isn't about what Vanessa wants anymore. He was right. By sunset, the Silver Ridge clubhouse parking lot was overflowing. Pickup trucks lined the shoulders. Golf carts crowded the entrance. People stood outside holding folders, printed emails, screenshots, and appraisal documents. Nobody looked excited. Nobody looked hopeful. They looked like investors arriving at a bad earnings report. I parked near the back and walked inside. The room was packed. More than 100 homeowners filled every chair. Others stood along the walls. At the front sat Vanessa Crowe and Daniel Price. Neither looked comfortable. That caught my attention immediately. A confident person doesn't grip a water bottle with both hands. Vanessa was gripping one now. The noise dropped when she stepped to the microphone. Thank you all for coming. Booze answered her, not many. Enough. She forced a smile. There has been a great deal of misinformation circulating regarding our community development plans. That was a mistake. The room reacted instantly. A man near the front stood up. My mortgage documents aren't misinformation. Another homeowner held up a brochure. Neither is this. Others joined in. Questions came from every direction. Did we have lake access? Who approved the recreation fees? Why were county records different? Who altered the filings? Vanessa tried answering all of them. She couldn't, because every answer led back to the same problem: the documents. Eventually, Daniel Price stepped forward. The attorney voice appeared. Calm, measured, careful. At this time, there are ongoing reviews concerning historical development records. The crowd hated that answer. You could feel it. People who think they've been deceived don't want legal language. They want names, dates, responsibility. Ryan Porter stood. His voice carried across the room. When did the HOA learn the easement was denied? Dead silence. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Vanessa stared at the floor. That silence told everyone more than a response would have. Then another homeowner stood. A retired teacher named Carol Jensen. She held up her closing packet. This says recreational access was a permanent feature. More papers appeared around the room, one after another. Emails, flyers, marketing sheets, HOA newsletters. The evidence wasn't coming from county officials anymore. It was coming from the residents themselves. The room was turning. Fast. Then the doors opened. Everything stopped. Every conversation. Every argument. Every accusation. County Attorney Rebecca Sloan walked in. Behind her came Martha Gaines, Tom Weaver, and two county investigators carrying document boxes. Nobody spoke. Rebecca Sloan didn't need introductions. Most people in the county knew exactly who she was. She reached the front of the room and placed a thin black folder on the table. The sound seemed louder than it should have. Vanessa looked sick. Daniel Price looked worse. Rebecca adjusted her glasses. Before this meeting continues, Bell County needs to clarify several issues concerning representations made during the sale and marketing of Silver Ridge Estates. Nobody moved. Nobody even coughed. The room was completely silent. Rebecca opened the folder. The county has completed a preliminary review of the lake access filings. Vanessa immediately stood. Our legal team is still evaluating. Rebecca cut her off. No. The single word froze the room. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. The time for evaluation passed when homes were sold. A murmur spread through the crowd. Rebecca continued. Residents deserve accurate information. Martha stepped forward carrying several documents. Tom followed with more. The investigators began placing copies on the front table. People strained to see. Ryan looked back at me. I could tell he already knew. Whatever came next wasn't going to save the HOA. It was going to expose it. Rebecca rested one hand on the stack of records. Then she looked directly at Vanessa. For the record, were homeowners informed that the county had denied the original lake access easement application? Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The silence that followed felt longer than any argument, because every person in that room suddenly realized the same thing. The county hadn't come to answer questions. The county had come with evidence, and whatever was inside those document boxes was about to change everything. Rebecca Sloan waited until the room was completely silent. Then she opened the first box. Inside were copies of county filings, development records, approval requests, and archived correspondence. Nothing dramatic, just paper. But paper had brought Silver Ridge to this moment, and paper was about to tear it apart. Martha Gaines pulled out 2 documents and placed them side by side on the front table. Even from the back of the room, I could see people leaning forward. Ryan Porter stood. Lisa stepped beside him. Half the room followed. Rebecca pointed to the first document. This is the original easement filing submitted to Bell County. Then she pointed to the second. This version was later distributed as supporting development documentation. The difference looked small. A few lines, a paragraph, some revised language. But legally, it was enormous. The original filing clearly stated that lake access approval had been denied due to unresolved ownership conflicts involving Eagle Rock Road. The second version suggested that approval remained under active review. The room erupted. People started talking all at once. Some were angry. Some were confused. Others looked sick. Rebecca let them talk for a few moments. Then she raised a hand. Silence returned. The county has verified that the original denial was received by parties connected to the Silver Ridge development. Vanessa looked down. Daniel Price closed his eyes briefly. That reaction didn't go unnoticed. A homeowner near the front stood up. When did they know? Rebecca didn't hesitate. More than 14 months ago. The room exploded again. This time there was no confusion, only anger, because homeowners now understood something simple. The problem wasn't that access had been denied. The problem was that homes continued to be marketed afterward. Ryan Porter held up his appraisal report. My property value was increased because of private lake access. Another homeowner raised a sales packet. So was mine. A woman near the side wall stood. My retirement account paid for that house. More voices joined. More documents appeared. One after another. The evidence wasn't isolated. It was everywhere. Rebecca opened another folder. This is a collection of marketing materials provided to investigators by residents. Brochures, advertisements, community newsletters, promotional maps. Every one of them carried the same message. Lake access, waterfront recreation, resident privileges, benefits tied directly to Eagle Rock Lake, benefits that never legally existed. Then Martha did something I didn't expect. She looked toward me. Jack? I stood. The room became quiet again. Martha gestured toward the table. Would you please bring your binder? I walked forward carrying the same worn leather binder my father had assembled decades earlier. The same binder Vanessa had ignored. The same binder that had been sitting in my truck when she called 911. I placed it beside the altered filing. Rebecca opened it carefully. Maintenance records, property tax filings, survey maps, road registrations, ownership history, 40 years of uninterrupted documentation, a complete chain, clean, recorded, verified. Rebecca turned several pages, then addressed the room. The ownership of Eagle Rock Road has remained unchanged since its registration. No gaps, no disputes, no transfers, no HOA rights. Nothing. The contrast was devastating. On one side of the table sat decades of verified records. On the other sat altered language and marketing promises. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Lisa Porter asked the question everyone was thinking. What happens now? Rebecca closed the binder. The county has opened a formal fraud review concerning representations connected to Silver Ridge Estates. The words hit the room like a shockwave. Formal fraud review. Not concern. Not inquiry. Not clarification. Fraud review. Vanessa stood abruptly. This is ridiculous! Nobody defended her. Not one person. Daniel Price didn't move. Several homeowners actually stepped away from the front table as if creating distance. Physical distance. Social distance. Legal distance. The shift was impossible to miss. Vanessa looked around the room searching for support. She found none. The people who had once applauded her community plans were staring back at her like strangers. Because trust had finally broken. Completely. Rebecca gathered the documents. The county is freezing multiple development requests pending the outcome of the review. Another wave of murmurs spread through the room. Frozen permits, frozen projects, frozen expansion plans. Everything Vanessa had spent the past year promoting suddenly stopped moving. Ryan Porter sat down heavily. Lisa squeezed his hand. Other homeowners looked equally stunned. Not because they hated Vanessa, because they finally understood the size of the problem. This wasn't just about a road, or a gate, or a lake. It was about hundreds of thousands of dollars tied to promises that may never have been real. As the meeting slowly unraveled, people began leaving in small groups, talking quietly, sharing documents, exchanging phone numbers, organizing. The HOA wasn't collapsing in one dramatic moment. It was collapsing piece by piece, exactly the way trust collapses. And watching Vanessa stand alone at the front of that room, I realized something. The legal battle wasn't over, not even close. But the fight for the truth was. Because after tonight, nobody could honestly claim they didn't know. The records had spoken, and the records had won. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It never does. The emergency meeting ended, but the consequences were only beginning. Within a week, homeowners had formed a legal committee. Within 2 weeks, multiple law firms were reviewing disclosure documents connected to Silver Ridge Estates. Within a month, the development company was facing demands for records, communications, and marketing materials. The county fraud review remained active. Several expansion permits were frozen. Future construction plans stalled. And for the first time since arriving at Eagle Rock Lake, Vanessa Crowe wasn't the loudest voice in the room anymore. She wasn't in the room at all. Most mornings I went back to my normal routine. Fence repairs, equipment maintenance, checking the shoreline. The same things I'd done long before Silver Ridge existed. The difference was the traffic. People stopped by now. Not to argue, to ask questions. Ryan and Lisa Porter came more than once. So did other homeowners. Some wanted copies of county records. Some wanted help understanding easements. Some simply wanted the truth. I gave them what I could. Nothing more. Nothing less. Because despite everything that had happened, most of those people weren't my enemies. They had trusted the wrong promises. That was their mistake, not a crime. One afternoon, Ryan sat on my porch, looking out toward the lake. My wife was angry at first. I nodded. Understandable. Then she got sad. That made sense too. People can recover from losing money. What hurts more is realizing someone took advantage of trust. Ryan stared at the water. You know what bothers me most? What? We never checked. I thought about that for a moment. Then I shook my head. Most people don't buy a house expecting to investigate the sales brochure. He laughed quietly, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in weeks. The lawsuits continued through summer, then into early fall. Property disclosures were rewritten. Recreation fees disappeared. Marketing language changed. The lake access claims vanished from every official document connected to Silver Ridge. Eventually, the HOA board voted to accept Vanessa's resignation. No dramatic speech, no public defense, just a notice posted to residents. One paragraph. After everything she'd built her reputation on, that was how it ended. A paragraph. 3 weeks later, I saw her for the last time. I was replacing a section of chain near the gate when a black SUV pulled onto the shoulder. Vanessa stepped out alone. No attorney, no board members, no audience. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked toward the road. The county closed everything. I kept working. I heard. They froze the waterfront project. I nodded. I heard that too. Silence. She shoved her hands into her jacket pockets. The developers told us the paperwork would get fixed. There it was, the closest thing to an admission I'd ever hear. Not an apology, but closer than I'd expected. I tightened the chain. That wasn't your property to promise. She looked away. I know that now. For a few seconds, the only sound was the metal chain against the gate. Then she glanced toward the lake. You really kept every record? I smiled slightly. My father did. That answer seemed to land somewhere deep, because she suddenly understood something that had taken this entire disaster to learn. The road hadn't beaten her. The gate hadn't beaten her. The paperwork had. 40 years of it. Carefully kept. Carefully recorded. Carefully preserved. She looked back at me one last time. I never thought it would end like this. I secured the lock. Most shortcuts don't advertise where they lead. She let out a breath, then climbed back into the SUV. A few seconds later, she was gone. The dust settled quickly. The road became quiet again, just the way it used to be. A few days later, I walked down to the lake before sunrise. The water was calm. Ellen's flower boxes still hung beside the dock. The same flowers, the same lake, the same road my father built all those years ago. Nothing about the place had changed. Only the people had. I looked back toward the gate one last time. Still locked. Still private. Still exactly where it belonged. The fight was over. The truth was on record. And Eagle Rock Lake finally felt like home again. Some people believe authority comes from titles, meetings, and loud voices. Out on the frontier, authority comes from deeds, records, and the truth written on paper.
If there's one lesson in this story, it's that protecting something important doesn't always require a fight. Sometimes it requires patience. Jack didn't win because he was louder than anyone else. He didn't win because he had more power. He simply kept the record, taught the truth, and stayed steady when other people make assumptions. And when the question finally came, the answer was already there. That's a lesson worth remembering, whether you're talking about land, family, business, or any commitment that's made over the long haul. There's also something reassuring about knowing the facts still matter. Promises can be misunderstood, plans can change, people can make mistakes. But honest records and honest work have a way of standing the test of time. In the end, what was reserved wasn't trust abroad. It was trust in the idea that truth deserves a fair hearing. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with an HOA dispute, a property-like issues, or a situation where paperwork ended up telling a very different story than what people were saying? Drop a yes in the comments or share where you're watching from and what you would have done in track shows. And if you enjoy a story about quiet determination, property rights, and ordinary people standing their ground through patience and common sense, consider subscribing. We've got plenty more HOA, ranch, and land rights story coming your way. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.